everybody said, prepare for death, prepare for stillborn, prepare for miscarriage. I had looked around at funeral homes, but we also had a nursery at home
Yeah.
just in case. I mean, we're having to live in two worlds with one foot in either scenario. I thought, okay, Lord, when she's born, whatever's happening with her, whatever she's doing, whatever you're doing through her, that's where I'll go and take that as your answer.
Oh, friends, I have such an encouraging and uplifting episode for you today. I'm sure by now, maybe you're aware of the online controversy surrounding a post from Jesse and Ashley Ridgeway. The Ridgeways are YouTubers with Jesse's channel topping over 4 million subscribers, and they recently went viral when they announced that they had aborted their baby due to a trisomy 21 diagnosis, which is Down syndrome. So I was so deeply grieved when I saw this post and learned that they had been bringing their audience along the whole journey of discovering they were pregnant, learning they were expecting a baby boy, and then finally announcing their decision to tragically abort their baby. And this made me think of my friend Carli, a young mom with a beautiful boy named Shep, who also has trisomy 21. I texted Carli and I just said, I know you've probably seen this. I'm sure you have some thoughts. Do you want to share your thoughts about this on my podcast? And she said, in fact, I do. And I'd like to introduce you to my friend Mandi, whose daughter has trisomy 18, which is a different genetic abnormality called Edwards disease. And typically, when people get a diagnosis of trisomy 18, they are told that their child is incompatible with life. They're told that the baby will probably die in the womb. Or if they are born, they will only live a few minutes to a few hours, and there's really just nothing we can do. And Mandi has quite a different story to tell. So both of these trisomy mamas joined me to talk about the controversy and to share their very intimate stories of receiving their diagnoses, choosing life, and what their lives look like today. So in this episode, we watched the video of the Ridgeways receiving the news of their diagnosis. We talked through the ex-post where they announced their abortion. And these moms, you guys, have so much depth and wisdom to offer. And it's truly our hope. The whole reason we got together to have this conversation is because we're hoping that this episode will literally save some lives. So to date, there are 24 million views on the Ridgeway's announcement. And my concern is that this will signal a lot of other people who receive similar diagnoses that this is okay. This is just what everybody does. When you get this diagnosis, you just abort your baby and start over. And so please, if you're pregnant, if you've received a diagnosis like this, if life feels very scary and uncertain and maybe even bleak and hopeless, I want to encourage you that not only is there hope and resources for you for support, but there is so much joy and depth of life that can come out of a situation like this. And one resource I really want to point you to is one that Mandi has put together. And she is on Instagram and YouTube at A Little Extra Momming. And that is also the name of her podcast, A Little Extra Momming. And you can go to her website, which is extracarecollective.com. And through the website, listeners can access her free prenatal guide, her entire guide library for key early steps of your journey, exploring other resources. And there you can subscribe for ongoing support and encouragement. Can't wait for you to listen to this conversation with Mandi and Carli. Carli, let's start with you. Would you just give us a thumbnail sketch of your journey of receiving that diagnosis of special needs, what that looked like for you, and then what has the outcome been over the past few years?
That's going to be hard to encapsulate in a thumbnail sketch because it's just
and we'll get deeper into it as we go along. But I just want to give context for people as to what exactly you've walked through.
Sure. So in 2022, we had our son Shepherd in August. We did not do the NIPT test initially at the 10 weeks when it's offered.
And that's the test that tells you the markers for things like trisomy 21,
yes,
which is Down syndrome, right? And
yes.
Then, does that also give you the markers for trisomy 18? Okay, same thing.
So a lot of people, I mean, almost everyone is offered that test now. It's just kind of across the board. And we actually did it with our firstborn just to find out the gender because we didn't know there were other options, which is what we did with Shep actually, is just like a only for the gender test. And it's really expensive too. So, anyways, so we didn't do that for Shep this time around because we're like, oh, we can just do this mail order gender test. So we get to the 20-week ultrasound, which is the anatomy scan, and really everything looked normal except for his limbs were tracking a little shorter in proportion to the rest of his body. And so they were like, this is probably nothing. We'll just do a growth scan because he was pretty small in general. Um, and so we went back in a few weeks, and again, he was tracking small. We were like, we'll just do another growth scan. Again, it's probably nothing. Well, by the third or fourth ultrasound, they were just walking us through the possibilities, and they said that there was a chance of an anomaly. But we were actually at a fairly new midwifery that was partnered with a hospital. And so we were like their first patients that they even had something abnormal with. And they were like, it's probably nothing still, but if you want to, you can do one of these NIPT tests just to kind of rule some things out. And so we ended up doing that just to kind of give ourselves peace of mind. And very long story short, we got the results back and it was positive for trisomy 21. And I got that information through calling multiple times. And finally, the nurse, who just clearly didn't know how to handle this type of situation, just said, yeah, he has Down syndrome. And it's just like, have a good day.
Wow.
Click. And we were beside ourselves. I mean, I have always had a huge heart for the special needs community. I've nannied kids that had Down syndrome, and I knew the joy and the beauty that was there, but you also just it's blindsiding. You have this vision for your life that never typically includes a neurodivergent child. And so eventually we did get the amniocentesis just because I'm the type of person that like I just need to know all the facts I possibly can. And we got the diagnosis actually at 32 weeks, which is typically later than most people get that diagnosis of trisomy 21 because normally they'll get it in the screening or at the anatomy scan. There'll be more signs. So, or it's a birth diagnosis. So, I feel like the Lord was very gracious in the amount of time that he gave us to process that information because it wasn't the entire pregnancy that I was, going to the worst case scenarios or thinking of, just the unknown. But it was a good amount of time to be able to mentally prepare and gather resources and build really sweet relationships with people that were like, hey, this is not a death sentence. There's a lot of joy ahead of you. And I mean, there's just so much available nowadays to people who have kids with Down syndrome. So there's so much I could say about that. We met with a family from our local Down syndrome association, this couple that had a 3-year-old daughter at the time with Down syndrome. And she just, they covered us and loved us and really brought a reality check of like what the medical community can sometimes scare your pants off with versus what the reality of loving a child with Down syndrome is like.
Yeah.
And that was like it went from night to day for us, of just like, oh, like this is what life could look like. And it's beautiful. We also did have a huge health scare. They said that he was going to have an issue with his aorta and his heart, or there was like a 50-50 chance of that happening. And so I had like 40 plus ultrasounds in my pregnancy. I was in and out of Vanderbilt. I mean, my whole life was just a blur of appointments. And it was very overwhelming. And during that time, I just read Matthew on repeat, just throwing throwing myself at the feet of Jesus, and knowing that he suffered too, and that I had no choice but to just trust that he knew what was going to happen and unfold. And bottom line is there were all kinds of things that the doctors were saying would happen, that he was going to spend months in the NICU, have open heart surgery. And in our case, none of that actually happened. And he's been really healthy. We're very, very fortunate. But yeah, life with Shep, I literally would not trade it. I wouldn't change a hair on his head.
Yeah. He is such a
And
ray of light. We're going to show pictures in a moment, but he walked in the house today and I just could not stop smiling. Like he just is such a ray of sunshine. I
yeah.
remember walking with your mom one morning and she told me about the diagnosis when you were still pregnant and I felt the gut punch.
Yeah.
And I'm, this far removed from it, but even I felt the gut punch like, of course, you know that this child has value and is made in the image of
Right.
God. And you know that there's going to be joy. You know there's going to be all of this good stuff. But at the same time, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
And you have to prepare for that journey. And your mom was sharing how, we're just wanting to be able to prepare as best we can. And I love that. So with that, I want to go to you, Mandi. Your story is a bit different. There are some similarities. Yours has, it was interesting because in some ways, your story, Carli, represents best case scenario with
Yeah.
some of the diagnoses you can get. And Mandi's, yours is a lot more medically complicated. So tell us about your journey.
Yeah. So let's see here. We started looking at expanding our family in 2020, which I know sounds a little funny because it was the middle of COVID. But we thought, we're home
I think
anyway.
there's probably a lot of children born out of
Yes.
COVID, I'm guessing.
I was like,
The baby boom.
It's COVID. Where are we going? I guess this is the time where I could go ahead and be pregnant and uncomfortable and all the things and not have to worry about it. So, so we, opened ourselves up to that. And let's see, in September, I found out I was pregnant. And then we did just one of those 3D, 4D ultrasounds that they offer around 15, 16 weeks. So you can just kind of get a look at them. And we thought, well, we could either spend our money on one of those blood tests to find out the gender, or we could do this and we'd have pictures and that would be really fun. So we did that. And she was tracking a little bit small, but nothing really crazy. But we found out we're having a girl. So we were really excited about that because we already had a little girl. So they were going to be these two really close in age sisters. And so we started really just dreaming and thinking about how fun that was going to be. And we had a couple of weird little hiccups with the pregnancy that didn't turn out to be anything big. There was like a little hemorrhage that they just had their eye on. Scared me for a minute, but they said everything was fine. But they kept asking me, am I sure about my due date or who set the due date, that kind of thing. We were using a midwife because we didn't want to deal with the hospital regulations that were constantly changing during COVID. And I didn't want any surprises pulled during that process about who could be there, who couldn't, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because, don't like surprises. And then we got some really fun ones. So we were using a midwife, and that meant we went to a couple of different places for the ultrasounds. And that's why there was some question as to, okay, who set the date? Should we move it? She's a little small. But it was ultimately decided, let's just leave it where it is and see how we track. But no one was concerned about anything really. And then we had our 20-week anatomy scan. And I kept getting asked during the ultrasound, which normally the tech is very quiet. They're not really telling you much. But she asked me probably 3 different times how old I was and if we had done any blood work, any genetic testing. And I was like, I've answered that question a couple of times. Thank you for reminding me this is a geriatric pregnancy.
Yes. I had the same thing.
Yes. So I thought, well, this is, strange. And she said, very active, though. She wins the award for being very active. And I said, okay, well, that's great. That's good news. So I go home and I feel a little funny about that, but I thought I'm just being paranoid. And then I get a call from our midwife the next day. And she says, I need to come over and talk to you about the results. Our midwife thought that we'd already gotten the email about some of the results with our pregnancy, and we hadn't seen anything yet.
Wow.
So when she called to say that, that was my immediate red flag, that why would you have to come over in person to talk about the results of the ultrasound? So I scurry to get our toddler over to a friend's house so that I could sit in the quiet to receive our midwife and talk about this. And that's when she opens up this file and goes through this laundry list of the things that they found. And it was, the skull isn't the right shape. She's very far behind in growth at this point. They found some cysts on her brain. They're not sure she's really drinking the amniotic fluid. The whole 45 minutes that I was in there for the ultrasound, she didn't seem to swallow. So they're not sure that that's functioning right. Um, those were the main things. And I think there were only 2 cords to the umbilical cord instead of 3. So, and there was no nasal bone. And those were the things that she said, you put all those things together and there's a chromosomal abnormality. We just don't know which one until you do blood work. So I broke down and cried because, just like you said, there's a gut punch that comes with that. You think you know how you're going to respond no matter what the story is that you're living. But when it's delivered and your expectations are in one place and then the reality turns out to be so starkly different, it's very difficult to digest. So since we were told we don't know which diagnosis we're looking at, we were given basically 2 potentials. This could either be Down syndrome or this could be something else called Edwards syndrome. And I'd never heard of that. I'd never heard of trisomy 18. I think the only trisomy I'd ever heard of was Down syndrome. But all of the thoughts started going through my head of how this could unfold, and all of them felt very scary. And so my midwife says, okay, I'm going to refer you to an OB because obviously this is a much higher risk situation than what I typically deal with, but I'd love to stay on as your doula. And that was amazing because she was so gracious and so awesome with us. And we were paired with an OB who is pro-life and who also knows the Lord. And when we went to meet with him, his immediate reaction was to pray for us. And I just remember feeling like we're in the right place. And he did say, okay, let's not totally despair. When you hear hooves, let's think horses, not zebras. We're probably dealing with Down syndrome. So that was the silver lining, is it might just be Down syndrome. And he said, let's not, totally lose it thinking that it's Edwards, because I'm sure you've Googled the percentages there and they're super low that they would survive to birth.
What a perfect opportunity to tell you about today's first sponsor, which is 7 Weeks Coffee, America's pro-life coffee company. They are on a mission to fund the pro-life movement 1 cup of coffee at a time, and they do this by donating 10% of every single sale to pro-life pregnancy centers all across the country. Thanks to so many subscribers like you who have subscribed to their coffee club, they have raised over $1 million, well over $1 million now, for these pro-life centers, and that translates into saving thousands of lives. And their pro-life ethic is baked right into their name, because at 7 weeks of gestation, the baby is the size of a coffee bean, and that's when you can first detect a heartbeat on the ultrasound. And not only is it so good because of what they do, they're Christian-owned, pro-life, but the coffee is literally, without exaggeration, the best I've ever had. It's shade-grown, mold-free, pesticide-free, low acid, organically farmed, direct trade acquired. It just truly checks all the boxes. So go to 7weekscoffee.com today. And when you subscribe, you're going to save 15% forever, and you'll get a free gift. And exclusively for my listeners, if you use the code Alisa, you'll get an additional 10% off your first order. So that's 25% off your first order plus that free gift. Again, go to 7weekscoffee.com and use my code Alisa. Don't they say with Edwards, which is that trisomy 18, right? That they'll tell parents that it's the baby is incompatible with life.
Yes. They said this is a diagnosis that would be incompatible with life. Maybe 5% of them make it to be born alive. So we left with a pretty heavy heart that day, but he seemed pretty hopeful. He said, she is growing. I mean, she's growing behind, but she's growing. And there's a lot of things on the list of what could be wrong that's not on this ultrasound. So let's just see how things go. So I did the blood work and got it back, and it was like 100%, off the charts there's no way this isn't Edward's.
Mm.
And so he called me up and said, you won't believe it. It is zebras. And I went, oh my gosh, I kind of had this feeling, you know? And so we had some decisions to make. Do we prepare a nursery? Do we not?
Mm-hmm.
And my husband said something really profound to me that really helped me be okay with preparing a place for her. And he just said, if God can prepare a place for us in heaven, we can prepare a place for Ellie in our home, and we'll have open hands. What God does. So that's what we did. We just had open hands, and that was halfway through the pregnancy. So I spent the rest of that 19 to 20 weeks praying and crying almost continually.
Wow.
Lord, I can only imagine two things. Either she passes before she's born, or you heal her. And so I'm begging you to heal her. And those were really the only two things I even thought to ask. And quite honestly, I was deathly afraid of anything in between. If she survives but is not healed, and we're looking at this, I don't know how many days, weeks, months, years of really intense, hard stuff that I've never really had to consider. And so she came one day after her due date. And when we had her, we were at a hospital that had expressed to us that they would probably not be doing much, if any, intervention, which at the time we thought made sense. Now, looking back, do not agree with that at all. But at the time, the picture painted for us was one of, you either do nothing, you do comfort care and let them pass, and you don't really intervene if they need anything, or you throw everything in the kitchen sink at it, and it's really more for you than it is for them. And it's really selfish, and it puts them through a lot, and it's this terrible experience, and they just live their whole life in the hospital, and then they die young anyway. That was sort of what was expressed to us. So that felt like a really icky option.
Yeah.
And we felt really conflicted about how do you love this child and care for this child and steward this child into the arms of Jesus, potentially? What does that look like? How is that caring for them? I needed the practical there. I needed like the specifics. What does that actually look like? What's actually going to happen to her? So we go in and we have her, and she's breathing on her own, and she's not dying there in the hospital that night. She made it through the night in my arms. And we got to that 24-hour mark when I could go home, and we just said, let's just go home, get her home and let her meet the family. And because we don't know what's going to happen next. And so we get home, and we realize pretty quickly, we might be living that like worst case scenario of that in between, but we don't know what to do with that yet. It's all very shocking. And you're on all those high hormones of just having a baby, and still haven't had like the dump after, So I'm just ecstatic that she's alive. But we've got a tech here setting up an oxygen machine, and we've got, this pulse ox that's beeping constantly and alarming all the time. And so we had to look at each other and go, what are we doing? And I think we spent probably the next 3 weeks just wondering what in the world
Were
we
you
were
just
doing.
living
What is
moment
life?
to moment? Like you weren't sure if you would wake up the next morning and she would still be with you? Is
Right.
that the kind of thing
That
you were
was
just...
what we were living.
Yeah.
I was afraid to even turn and discipline my toddler, that I might turn and find that Ellie had passed in whatever little seat that I had her in. So we were definitely living that. But I remember even during the pregnancy, I went back and I thought through the experience of David with the first child that he and Bathsheba had. and how he throws himself on the floor and he's praying for this baby and he's fasting. And I thought, okay, Lord, I'm going to do that during my pregnancy, not the fasting part, but like the praying and the crying out and the begging. But when she's born, I'm going to see what your answer is, and I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to roll with that, and I'm going to match whatever's happening with her, whatever she's doing, whatever you're doing through her. That's where I'll go and take that as your answer. And so that's what we were just trying to figure out, especially in those first few weeks, was, so what is she doing? What is God doing? How do we respond to that and move with it?
Yeah.
Wow.
This
And
wasn't
she,
something the medical providers prepared you for.
No, it was the
Yeah.
one scenario that no one had spoken anything
Wow.
about, right? Everybody said, prepare for death, prepare for stillborn, prepare for miscarriage. I had looked around at funeral homes. I had looked around at what we wanted to do to commemorate her, how we would make mementos for her, when she was born. We would make Christmas ornaments because she wouldn't be around at Christmas. All the things we brought all that stuff to the hospital, but we also had a nursery at home just in case. I mean, we're having to live in two worlds with one foot in either scenario for 20 weeks was pretty
do you still feel that
exhausting.
way to a certain extent? Because here we are 5 years later and she's in my house downstairs.
No,
Okay.
there's been a lot of change in me, in her. There are certainly glimpses where I remember, oh yeah, this is a very unknown situation we're living in. But as you get a rhythm and you get to know this person, I mean, that was half of it too, is you're praying all these prayers and feeling all these feelings for someone you haven't met.
Yeah.
And you feel
It's very
them, you
hard.
know they're alive. There's life. Why are they speaking death over my child who is
Wow.
clearly moving and alive right now? And this is really hard to reconcile. We don't feel that level of intensity anymore, usually. We've had some moments, some glimpses where it is this stark reminder that anything could happen. And one day things will change and things will happen. I remember during my pregnancy and in those first few weeks after she was born, I had some relationships with women who had been through that part of the road. And I remember specifically asking one of them, I said, I know this is terrible to ask, but I have to know, what was it like the day that your child with Edwards syndrome passed? How did you know it was happening? Because I feel every day like I'm looking at her and wondering, do we just have like the sniffles or are we doing the thing? What are we doing today? And I need to know the difference. I need to know what you saw, what you felt, what you heard. And I was having to hold that every day and every night. And I would hearken back to the second half of what happened with David, how, yes, that baby passed. And he said, okay, that's the Lord's answer. And I'm going to get up and wash my face and have a meal and I'm going to move forward.
Yeah.
And it seemed odd that he would respond that way. But I had to tell myself and tell the Lord, I said, I'm going to take what you give me and I'm going to hold it. Maybe white knuckle it, but I'm going to hold it. And I'm going to just have to ask you all the time, what do you want me to do with this? Because I can't manufacture an answer. I can't control the scenario. As afraid as I might be of what the future might hold and how unknown it is and how totally unprepared and up to the task I feel, I'm going to have to depend on you to show me what this is.
Well, I've got another wonderful Christian-owned pro-life company for you today, and that is Adele Cosmetics. I love Adele Cosmetics for so many reasons. One, because I'm a girly girl, and I love my creams and potions and all the things. And they are a Christian-founded, family-owned company that creates handcrafted, high-end cosmetics and skincare that are all safe and clean and nourishing. And when I say high-end, I truly mean high-end. The formulas are beautiful, the packaging is super luxurious, and everything is non-toxic. No fake ingredients like synthetic fragrances or colorants. Everything's made in the USA with quality and safety in mind. So many products that I love. I love their hydrating mists. We're getting into summer. Your skin could be a little drier and it's gross and muggy outside. You can spray some of the mist on your face and it just feels so good and moisturizes your skin. I love their color cosmetics. I am wearing today my absolute staple Adele product, which is their nude lipstick. It's the best nude I've ever tried. And it's moisturizing. It goes on smooth. It doesn't fade or feather. It's just great. So I want you to go to Adele Natural Cosmetics today. It's spelled ADEL, naturalcosmetics.com. And you can use my code Alisa for 25% off your first order. Again, that's AdeleNaturalCosmetics.com. Use my code Alisa. Well, you know, part of the thing that's so powerful about that story of David is it's just totally unabandoned trust and surrender to the Lord. And sometimes I think about the fact, you know, we're Christians, we place our trust in Jesus, we have faith in Jesus, but it's not like a one-time thing where you just make a confession and then it's like an act of trust every single day. And the more difficult our circumstances, I think the more we have to do that. And we learn how to do that. So like in your case, you probably have learned to do that on a level that someone like me hasn't had to learn that yet. And it's powerful and it's so beautiful. And I want to show some pictures of the kids so people can have some context. But this first one, Mike, if you'll put that on, I want to, you know, when I reached out to you first, Carli, about this, because I remember reading this post and I had so many emotions, which I'm going to talk about. But I thought about you and I just thought, you know, I bet Carli's got some things to say about this. She goes, yes. And so does Mandi. I'm like, good, let's do it. But you sent me this picture and you said they could have had love like this. Right. Hold that. There it is. They could have had love like this. And then let's go through the rest of the pictures there. There you are. I'm going to narrate for the people who are listening on audio. We're just looking at pictures of Shep, and there's him with big sister and mama as a baby. So cute. Look at that. His little glasses.
I love that one.
That is so cute.
Oh my gosh.
Such a ray of sunshine. There's him at gymnastics class.
Dude, what a big
I really encourage. Oh, and there he is with Ellie. So
Yes,
they're buddies.
Mandi's
That's
daughter.
the little thing we haven't said yet.
Yes.
There's Ellie. Oh, so beautiful. There they are together.
Lifelong pals.
Yes, look at that. Meeting a little chick. Oh, there they are together. And I really want to encourage anybody who's listening on audio to just jump over to YouTube and look at these adorable pictures of these kids because they are so adorable and so cute. I want us to read through this post. And I kind of went back and forth, like, should we watch the video first? We're going to watch the video of the couple that received the diagnosis and that, but I want to kind of do it in the order that I was introduced to the story. And that was with this, I saw it on X, and this is Jesse Ridgeway. And here's what he announced. And I don't know, I didn't have any context for who they were. I guess they're social media influencers, YouTubers, something like that. And he said this, and Mike, you can put this up on the screen too. I have screenshots on here. Okay, and it says this. This week, my wife and I made the very difficult decision to terminate the pregnancy due to trisomy 21, which is the diagnosis you received, Carli, for Shep. He goes on, the choice was not made lightly. We really appreciate all of the personal stories that you guys shared with us, especially the unconditional support we received from fans with no matter what we decided. I know some of you may be very disappointed to hear this news. We are devastated. This has been extremely traumatic for both of us, especially Ashley. She underwent the procedure, and by procedure, he means abortion, earlier this week and is on the mend. Thankfully, everything went smoothly, but emotionally, we are drained. Trisomy 21, also known as Down syndrome, is caused by an extra chromosome. It is caused by an error in cell division, like a glitch. The odds of having a baby with this is 1 in 1,000. When I first confronted this news, I was shocked but optimistic. If they're a little slow intellectually, then we'll make it work. I signed on to be a parent, come what may. I just didn't fully understand what Down syndrome entailed. Once we made it public, it became clear that most people don't know what Down syndrome entails and know it's not the same as autism. 50% of babies with DS have heart defects. 75% will have hearing challenges. Over 50% will have vision problems. Impaired immune function, developmental disabilities, learning disabilities, delayed physical development, poor muscle tone, structural issues with the face, decreased lifespan, etc. Sadly, the list is long. Feel free to look it up. Down syndrome isn't a blessing. It is objectively, and I'm going to say crappy, from a health perspective. I didn't realize just how rough it is for the child, let alone the family. More often than not, they would be fully dependent on others for the rest of their life. The miscarriage risk is also close to 50%, which made matters worse. They may never see the light of day, and it puts Ashley further at risk. We spoke with doctors, friends, family, and genetic counselors and learned that up to 90% of women terminate their pregnancy after learning the baby has trisomy 21. This was way higher than I expected. I thought it would be lower given that I hear so many say they kept or would keep the baby. I believe that's just because most terminations happen privately. It feels shameful. A lot of judgment being cast. You never think you'd be in this type of a situation until it happens to you, and then things change. To all my fans who have weighed in on this topic, who have autism, Down syndrome, or any other conditions, we appreciate you. You matter a lot, and we're glad you're here. I commend you and your families for having the strength and courage to push forward. As for us, we made a difficult decision that we believe in the long run will be beneficial for our family. Thankfully, we had a choice. It will take a little time to move on, but we are excited to try again in the future and hopefully have a better outcome. Love you guys, and thank you for understanding. I can't imagine the emotions that you guys were feeling. I was feeling a broad range. I felt anger.
Yeah.
I felt, but at the same time, I think the first thing I felt was this weird kind of compassion where it was like, it's so very clear that they don't understand what they have just done.
Yeah.
And out of mercy, you almost want to pray they never realize it, but actually out of real mercy, you pray they do.
Yeah.
And that will be the hardest day of their life. And I do pray that for them. I want to just be really clear. I know they say they've received death threats. We're not condoning anything like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to take seriously what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so my comment on this, after I pondered it for a few days, I'll just read my post, and then I really want to camp on what you guys think about this. But I wrote this: as I've pondered this over the last few days, I keep thinking about what Clay Jones wrote in his book, Why Does God Allow Evil? Jones points out that when we think of genocide, we think of demented psychopaths running around on murderous rampages. In reality, genocide is mostly committed by normal, everyday people, including moms, dads, and sweet grandmas who bake cookies for the bake sale. Jones writes, and then the following is a long quote from his book. It says, "It has been fascinating to me that absolutely every genocide researcher I have ever read, and I've read a lot of them, and absolutely every genocide victim I've ever read to a person, concludes that genocide is just what the average person does." Professor and Holocaust survivor Fred E. Katz sums up exactly what kind of person participated in the Holocaust. He wrote that only a tiny proportion of the massive killings are attributable to the actions of those people we call criminals or crazy people or socially alienated people or even people we identify as evil people. Rather, they were actually carried out by plain folk in the population, ordinary people like you and me. Katz asks, who carried out the plans of the Hitlers and Stalins? His conclusion, ordinary people like you and me. Then he asks, who provides the intelligence, the brain power, the orderly thinking to translate crazy philosophies into a practical course of action? Ordinary people like you and me. Finally, who provides the quiet, sustained effort, the plain hard work it takes to carry out huge programs of murderous action? Ordinary people like you and me. And then that's the end of that quote. And then I just wrote, One of the reasons the post below is so chilling and horrifically evil is because it's so casual, ordinary, and nice.
Yeah.
May God have mercy on us. And that is just the depth of sadness that I was feeling at it. It's kind of like, hey, we killed our baby. Y'all have a great weekend now. That's kind of
Yeah.
now I know that they're talking about how it was traumatizing, and I'm not discounting that. And I want to get your thoughts on what you were feeling when you received your diagnosis as well. But the fact that we live in a culture of death, people are
Yeah.
calling it, where it is so easy to do something like this without really perceiving the consequences. They've even responded to some of the backlash saying, man, we've seen the darkest side of humanity. And I just want to be like, it was somebody else who said this on X that is so, apropos for this, where they said, actually, your child experienced the darkest part of
Yeah.
humanity. And so with that, I'll take it over to you guys. Let's start with you, Carli, because this is the same diagnosis that you received. What were
Yeah.
you feeling when you read that post? I love that all of our sponsors for today's episode are unapologetically pro-life. And I have another Christian-owned pro-life company for you. Good Ranchers, guys. I love Good Ranchers for so many reasons. This is American meat delivered right to your door, better than organic chicken, grass-fed beef. And I have a true Good Rancher story for you. My niece and her husband and their baby came over a couple days ago, and I wanted to just throw together a quick dinner. So I pulled out some steaks from my freezer from Good Ranchers. I thawed them, I seasoned them, and I just cooked them in a skillet, nothing fancy. But my niece was eating the steak and she goes, "Where is this steak from? This is so good." And I was like, well, I'm glad you asked. And I launched into my whole Good Ranchers commercial and basically let her know that what she's buying in the grocery store, this high quality meat that she thinks is really high quality, is really just being imported from overseas. Even the grass-fed beef, like 70 to 80% of the grass-fed beef that we're all buying in these fancy stores is coming from overseas, where we don't know the exact quality standards. There's not a lot of transparency, but that's why I love Good Ranchers, because every cut of meat is born, raised, and harvested right here in the USA. And they have a great deal going on just this month only for Father's Day. So you can go to goodranchers.com and pick out any Father's Day gift box. And when you do that, you're going to get free Wagyu burgers. You guys, these Wagyu burgers are a staple in our home. We absolutely love them. And you can use my code Alisa for a discount. So go to goodranchers.com today, get that Father's Day box, and use my code Alisa for a discount.
Yeah, so we kind of had the diagnosis given to us twice, without going into the extraordinary amount of detail that there really was in us learning that Shep had Down syndrome. We got the results of the NIPT test. The information was delivered to us when I was about 28 weeks pregnant, as if it were an actual diagnosis, even though it wasn't. So when we first got those results, we were told by my midwife that it likely was not going to be the case. And so we were anxiously awaiting the results, but pretty hopeful that that wasn't going to be the case, that there was not going to be an abnormality. So I kept calling the midwifery, and the results were taking a little longer than they had told us to expect, which I now know was likely because there was an abnormality. So I kept calling the office, and I was like, what's taking so long with the results? And finally I got a nurse on the line who read the results, and she was just kind of quiet. And she told us that he had Down syndrome, and you could tell she was fumbling over her words and likely hadn't been in this situation before. And I remember sitting on my couch. My husband was not home at the time. My daughter was taking her nap, and I just sat there and did exactly what Ashley did in the video, which was just weep and have so many things flash before my eyes of, to be totally transparent, like the selfish desires that I had for my life and what I thought retirement was going to look like, and my perfect little girl and perfect little boy and what their relationship would look like, and all of those things. Even though I already had a huge heart for children with special needs, I'd nannied several. I had not expected that this would be the path of my life without me having chosen it. And so I was broken, and I wept and wept. And then actually, about a week later, we found out that we actually had a 50% chance of the baby having Down syndrome. And so we then, after grieving for about a week, were consulted with the genetic counselor, which thankfully in the state of Tennessee at that, I was like 28 weeks pregnant. So abortion was not even an option, which obviously I wouldn't have chosen that, but I know many people maybe would. So the genetic counselor was not presenting that as an option to us, but was talking about it with a very melancholy kind of, just a dark, tone about if this actually were the case that Shep would have Down syndrome. And so we waited. I ended up getting an amniocentesis because it's just my personality to have to know all the things. And so I did that. And a couple weeks later, I got the email just like Jesse and Ashley did that indicated he does indeed have trisomy 21. And I was there with my husband and my daughter, and we were just we had some time to, anticipate that this might be the case. And we just kind of were like, okay. And thankfully, I know actually several couples, but the one I was closest to who has a daughter with Down syndrome, we immediately called up and just sat on our bed weeping and talking to them. And they were like, I know that this feels like a death sentence, but you actually have no idea, like, the beauty that is
Wow.
ahead. And like, we would not change a thing about our daughter. And my guess is that you guys will probably feel the same way. And so, that was our journey of learning he had Down syndrome. I had about 7 weeks to process that information before we actually met him. And kind of like Mandi was saying, like, before you actually give birth to your child, there's only so much. I'm not that person that just feels so intimately connected to the baby before they're born. And that's part of why I needed to know, I always wanted to find the gender as soon as possible with all 3 of my kids. Cause I'm like, I just want to know you. And then when they're on the outside, it's like, there you are.
Mm.
And so once we had Shep, you just knew how special he was.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
So walking through all that, when you read this post,
yeah.
what were you feeling? What were you thinking?
Well, I will admit that on the other side of this, being almost 4 years into this journey of having a child with Down syndrome, I am loving him so fiercely. Compassion in situations of abortion of children with Down syndrome is not my strong suit because it is so personally painful and tragic. And I know what it involves to have an abortion, especially at the nearly 20 weeks that they did, which is like dismembering. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's an incredibly painful, violent act. So my first reaction was a lot of anger and sadness, but also just grief over, you can
Yeah.
so obviously see that they spoke to medical providers that had one singular perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the thing that struck me was that the very end of their post was basically saying, oh, we didn't know that most people abort their babies
Yeah.
with Down syndrome. So essentially, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, okay, so because everybody's doing it, that means it's okay. That's just a classic, absolute fallacy. And
Yeah.
like you were saying about the Holocaust, it's like ordinary people.
Yeah.
It's because everybody was doing it. Everybody was turning the Jews in. Everybody's just aborting their child because they have an abnormal,
Yeah.
genetic makeup. And so, yeah, Mandi is a little bit more, she has a bit more of, I guess, I don't want to say compassion, but
let me comment on that a little bit, because the compassion that I felt was more like, there's a righteous indignation that I think is appropriate because it's murder. And I
Mhm.
think so often, even in the abortion conversation, we fail to call it what it is. And when we fail to call it
Yeah.
what it is, we actually withhold from people the true ability
Yeah.
to really grieve over their sin. And of course, there's repentance available for them and for every woman who's had an abortion. But if we sugarcoat what the sin actually is, then we're actually preventing, or, we're putting a stumbling block in front of the person
Yeah.
to be able to fully grieve and repent and feel that sense of, oh, I have done this thing, And so I think that even back to the David example, that I think that's part of the reason David could surrender so faithfully to the Lord in that moment, because the punishment is just.
And I will add, I think a lot of the anger was just the fact that they portrayed the absolute worst case scenario medically that a person with Down syndrome would have. And that is very often not the case. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, there is a higher likelihood of lots of medical complexity, but they listed every possibility and
Yeah.
painted this picture of having a child with Down syndrome that's not very realistic, that, that they had concocted in their mind, in tandem with whatever their doctor was saying. And they blasted this out to the
Yes.
world and
Yes.
normalized
Monetized it.
this and monetized it. I mean, watching the videos, I was just like, this makes me feel sick that this is happening. But it made me so angry that this is going to be what a lot of people who are watching this on social media, if they get a diagnosis like this is going to be the first thing in their mind
Yeah,
of,
that's right.
oh, I'll just do what they did. And that's perfectly normal because this is what life with a child with Down syndrome would look like. And that's not the best outcome.
Well, that's
So
exactly why I wanted to do this episode, because I know that there will be people that will read that post, watch the videos, and they'll go, oh, okay, like everybody's doing it. I
yeah.
can just do it. So I
Yeah.
am praying to God that this episode will save lives, that
Yes.
moms will listen to us, that this episode will make it into their sphere, and they will
Yes.
listen and go, oh, actually there's hope. There's a reason to choose life, not just because, I mean, not that it's always easy, as Mandi
Yeah.
will attest, but because we know that these babies are made in the image and likeness of God, and they are alive and they are human. Therefore, they deserve basic human rights to life, right?
Yes.
So Mandi, what were you thinking when you saw that post?
When I read it, I did have a range of emotion. I think more of the anger is toward the medical community than it is toward
Mhm.
the parents in this scenario. Um, I think that you can see it in how he wrote it too.
Yeah.
He had a potentially open heart at one
Mm.
point,
Yeah.
and this math gets thrown at him with
Wow.
all these things,
Which a lot
and
of that
he
was wrong,
turns.
by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's his, I thought maybe, okay, we have some intellectual delay or whatever, like, well, we'll work with that. Like, well, I'm open. You can see it.
Mm.
And then he says, oh, but I didn't realize it was going to be all of these really hard things. And you can tell that someone has just saddled him with all of the potential laundry list,
Mhm.
as if one child is going to have all of those
Right.
things. Not each of these things is potentially a thing, but
Yeah.
throw it all at. And then to not even say, and there's plenty of interventions that can help with
Yeah.
all
Right.
of these things.
The life expectancy has doubled over the past
Yeah. I mean,
30
and
years.
why? Because the medical community is actually finally catching up to go, oh, it's okay to treat someone who has chromosomal abnormalities the same way we treat people who don't have chromosomal abnormalities, but have the exact same birth defects,
Mm.
because they happen all the time in
Yeah.
people who don't have a syndrome.
Yeah.
And so that's what babies getting open heart surgery is about. That's what glasses are for. That's
Right.
what hearing aids are for. There are lots of children who have these same issues that don't have Down syndrome that get all of the medical intervention. It's not even a question.
Yeah.
Are you going to provide intervention for your child if they have these issues? It's only when there's a chromosomal abnormality that you now start saying, Hello, parent who is grieving with this difficult news. Now make a decision as to whether or not we provide any care or you even allow them to live
Yeah.
long enough to be born. So I think to put a parent in that position, first of all, is where some of that evil lies that we don't name. I think just even throwing it out there and saying,
Yeah.
by the way, A, this is going to be really hard. B, we have an out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think when you hand somebody that out, they're already, and when they're already scared, they're already facing something they don't even understand. It's dark and it's cloudy and they've never been through it. They may not know anybody who's ever been through it. They really don't want to go through it. Nobody like wakes up going, oh, I hope when I grow up that I'm, you know, tied deeply into this difficult caregiving scenario. No one's saying that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when a doctor hands you that and then says, we have an exit strategy,
Yeah.
most people are going to be like, maybe I don't need to think so hard about how that actually works.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Yeah.
just going to take it.
Yeah.
Because it is scary.
Yeah.
And so my heart, my anger in that scenario is more toward just a system that on the one hand has spent generations trying to perfect how we can help people through, you know, needing airway support or needing nutrition support or needing heart support or needing all these different things. And yet we're going to take an entire
Yeah.
people group and we're going to say, yeah, but deny it to them and say, oh, but they're not worth all of that. This is too hard. That
Yeah.
same group of people that has fought to create all of these mechanisms to help people
Wow.
through these problems are the ones saying, don't bother with this one.
Mm.
Wow.
Well,
And
let's
that-
call it what it is. It's eugenics.
Yeah.
Eugenics is when you're selecting who gets to be born based on, you know, they're self-selecting to have certain traits that will go into the population. And that's really, people are self-selecting. They're aborting based on sex, whether they, whether the Planned Parenthood people will admit that or not. People are doing that.
Yeah.
They're obviously openly, wasn't it Denmark where they said they'd cured Down syndrome? Well, they didn't cure it.
They'd eliminated it from their
eliminated
population.
it with eugenics.
Yeah.
That's what they did. So,
well, and what's interesting there is you can't eliminate it. It's an anomaly that happens regardless of your genetic makeup or your spouse's genetic makeup. These trisomies, these monosomies, these things happen a lot of times as just biologically random scenario. So you're going to have to keep curing it with every anomaly, with every one that shows up. You can't eliminate it from showing up. It's not like a trait that you can work out or breed out of the population.
Yeah.
I
So
was
it's just
incorrect about
wild.
that. It wasn't that they said they've cured it. They've lowered it through eugenics.
Well, in
and
Iceland,
oh,
they
is it
say
Iceland?
Iceland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Iceland is the one. That must be what I'm thinking about. Yeah.
I know
So-
that in the Scandinavian countries, there's not. There's,
So you mentioned inaccuracies. Talk about that.
Well, the 1 in 1,000 number is inaccurate, which that's, kind of neither here nor there. But can we pull up the post again so that I can look at it?
Even like, it's so crazy to me. It says over 50% will have vision problems. And to your point, Mandi, but lots of people have vision problems.
Right.
I think that's a better percentage than the general population.
Right.
I would think.
Maybe. Well, and I will say,
you're wearing
Shep has-
contacts. I usually wear glasses. I don't know.
Yeah, same. Well, and Shep wears glasses, and honestly, he loves them. They've become a part of his personality that people are
adorable.
obsessed
They're
with.
a whole
So,
vibe.
it's silly. I mean, and like the 90% of women terminate their pregnancy after learning the baby has trisomy 21. That's actually 60 to 90%. We're not even entirely sure. The whole 1 in 1,000 number is more like 1 in 700 actually. Babies have Down syndrome. So, I mean, he's just throwing out all of these numbers to sound credible. And again, to the point of like giving this laundry list of percentages and all of these defects that can happen, it's painting this image of a child that has every single one of them. And in reality, like, sure, there might be a few things where they need some extra help, but it's not going to be all of those things.
Yeah.
And even if it is,
even if
It is. I was actually processing this with my mom this morning, and she was saying, like, we don't even watch movies that don't have a tough part of the plot line.
Yeah.
It's like, what is a life with no hardship?
Yeah.
Like, from a Christian perspective, these are the things, like we were discussing earlier, where God invites us to trust him in new ways, and where the secret sauce is of intimacy with God, and in working through hard things to get to the other side and be stronger for it, and be sanctified. And so I feel grieved for these families that choose to abort their babies, because they're missing out on all of the beautiful things, but also like the hard things that lead to beautiful things too,
Yeah.
Even my daughter at night, my 5-year-old daughter asks for stories, and I'll make something up. And if there's not like a hard part of the story, she's like, well, where's the hard? Give me like a difficulty that they're.
Yeah, give me some conflict, Mom.
She
Come
asks
on.
for the conflict. And I'm like, what? That's like what we're made for, is to co-labor with Christ in these things, and to work through the hard, and watch him show up in our weakness. And like, I can say my relationship with my boy is so deep and so strong because we've been through hard things together. When he was first born, the first few months were very hard, because, well, really the first like year. One week I counted an average of 8 medical appointments that we were at weekly, between the two of us, just trying to troubleshoot things, make sure he was okay, screen for this, screen for that. But we came out on the other side of that, and I mean, I feel such a deep bond with him because of that. And I really wouldn't trade it. And I know that sounds crazy, but
no, not at all. I mean, to your point, I got this from Michael Jones, but somebody asked a question about, why does God allow so much suffering and so many difficulties in our lives? And he just said something to the effect of, we all deep down know that conflict and suffering and struggle produces character, produces good things, produces courage and bravery and all the good things. And he said, and here, I'll prove it to you. Would you rather watch 4 hours of Teletubbies or Lord of the Rings?
Right. Yes.
And I was like, that is so good. I'm gonna use that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why everybody loves Lord of the Rings, because there's conflict, there's battle, there's courage,
you
all of the
overcome
things.
Something.
Overcome, yeah. All right, well, let's watch the video, because I want to get both of your reaction to this video of the couple receiving the news of the diagnosis, because you've been there, and I'd love for you to comment on that.
Well, thank you guys for all the support, and I think we could be about to find out right now.
I know, I'm already crying, and I don't know why.
When they did the amnio, they do it ultrasound guided. It's now a month later from our other ultrasound. This ultrasound, everything looked normal. Everything looked healthy.
They said everything looked normal. That's just not us just saying it.
Yeah.
They said everything looked normal.
Also, one of the nurses said they have been seeing a handful of false positives from these tests. Here we go. We're going to see the result. I have to download the official report. Abnormal insight result. Consistent with trisomy 21. No.
What is it? Wait. Where are you seeing this?
No.
Let me see. I can't see it.
It says abnormal insight result. Blah, blah, blah. Showed 3 chromosome 21 signals consistent with trisomy 21 Down syndrome. Genetic counseling is recommended. Pattern consistent with trisomy 21. Not the result we wanted to see, guys. I started to get kind of a not good feeling just when the results were sitting here. That's why I didn't want to open them. I started to feel really uncomfortable about it. Just kind of in shock, like, truly. We talked before this, guys, about what would we do if we confronted this scenario. Because this was the more likely scenario. We talked about terminating the pregnancy. Obviously, things could change because this is traumatic, like very traumatic. And I know you guys even watching this, this is traumatic for the whole community. I think now that we have a definitive result, we'll talk with these counselors and we're gonna have some hard conversations. Ashley is almost halfway through this thing. Not saying we force it, but like the kid seemed healthy, and there's been stories of where the kid comes out and is like super functional and So it's like, I don't know. There's just a lot to digest, and we're not really going to be doing that in this video. We just wanted to let you guys in on what the results were. Just things have been pretty dark for a while for us, and we thought this was going to be a nice little ray of sunshine, and it's not.
I mean, I that part at the end when he said things have just been so dark and this was like a ray of sunshine, that's when I thought of Shep. Because Shep literally is a ray of sunshine.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, I resonate so much with that video because I do remember what that felt like. I remember sitting on the couch and weeping over just the unknowns and the fear. But I also remember the slow progression of hope, of having conversations with people who have actually lived this, having a child with Down syndrome or being a person with Down syndrome. And, you know, the statistics he left out of his post was that there's a very credible study that was done out of the Boston Children's Hospital that shows that statistically people with Down syndrome are actually the happiest people group on planet Earth. And their families are obsessed with them. And I can attest to that. That's absolutely been our experience. And so it's like, it's just sad that there's such a narrative about what life will look like.
Yeah.
And that, as you see in this video and in other videos that he's posted, that just the words dark and despair and, you know, hoping for a better outcome. It's such a sad perspective because that's not the reality.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're missing out.
Oh.
It's like we just, as a culture, we have such a false idea of what a good life looks like. I think there's a G.K. Chesterton quote that's like, quoting somebody else in one of his books, he says, regarding a really wealthy person, like, I made it to the top and I realized nothing was there. And it's like, we have these ideas of what a prosperous life will look like, what a successful life will look like, what a beautiful social media life will look like, you know, for the highlight reel. And in reality, so often it's empty. And the people that have hardship in their stories and overcome things like these kids have to deal with have much richer stories and much greater joy. And that's been true of our story. I mean, it was a very hard first year, and but I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't change anything about Shep. And we're just obsessed with him. Like, truly. And obviously every child, every person is unique, and not every person with Down syndrome is the same. But in general, like, the statistics show, like, there's something different that is unifying in the Down syndrome community that is a whole lot of joy, a whole lot of quick forgiveness, a whole lot of just simplicity that I think as a world we need right now. I could go on and on. I mean, they're just, they missed out on a lot of joy. It's heartbreaking.
So sad.
A lot of emotions when I watched that. I think the first one is, like you said, identifying with Ashley, because in the longer unedited version of that, she spends a good amount of time crying and burying her face in her husband's shoulder. And I remember doing that exact thing, like the ugly heaving cry of just feeling like you have been hit by a truck, you know? And it, in her scenario, she had some kind of like you, like, there's word that this might be a thing, but then maybe it's not.
Yeah.
And then, oh, it is, you know? And for me, that initial experience of hearing it was the big blow, because it wasn't even based on numbers. It was like, these are physical traits we're seeing, you know? And so just absolutely feeling like the bottom had fallen out of my whole life. And I can see that on her face in that moment. And it just takes me right back to the couch that I was sitting on when I was talking to my midwife and just doing that exact same thing with my husband and thinking, oh gosh, and they're filming this and they're in front of everybody. And here I was just alone in my house and I was making apologies to my midwife for making a scene as if I were out in public, because you feel really vulnerable and all of a sudden just you're very self-aware in that moment of what you're doing. And it feels odd and it feels unsettling and unnatural to have these big emotional outbursts that might not be completely in line with your personality on a regular day, but this is not a regular day.
Yeah.
So seeing that definitely brings all of that back. And then two things actually stand out to me about what he says in particular in that moment. And one of them is that, yeah, your ultrasound was looking pretty good.
Right.
Like your child may have not had several of the things that you're so afraid of. Number one. And number two, I sense, and I could be completely off, I don't know them from Adam. I may have watched 5 of their videos ever, which I could watch 100 and still scrape the surface. I'm sure of what they've put out there. I don't know them, but I think a piece of me wants optimistically to believe that the words he's using when he says the kid this or the kid that, it sounds so dehumanizing. It sounds so detached. And I'm really hoping that it's because he's just self-preserving. You can hear this sense of, well, it's almost like how a comedian would deliver something really dark. You know, how a lot of us, when we go through something hard, we lean on the humor and we could see ourselves kind of doing a stand-up where we say, well, this terrible thing happened, sometimes this, sometimes that, blah. And it almost felt as though he was, without the laugh, delivering something that detached. Like,
yeah. In this culture of death with personhood theory and all of the things that we've been indoctrinated to believe about babies in the womb, we're not supposed to call them babies. They're fetuses. They're a clump of cells. They're not really human. Well, scientifically they're human, but we're not supposed to see them as a person until they're even out of the womb. This is even prevalent in the progressive Christian atmosphere with James Tallarico on Joe Rogan saying a child isn't really, doesn't really have life until they breathe for the first time. So we're trained and indoctrinated by our culture to not think of this as a human baby that has dignity, value, and worth when it's in the womb. And so I think what you're describing is really a product of the culture. He's not humanizing the baby yet.
Right.
but I think to take it even a step further, I think that where there could have been connection, it is purposefully being stunted.
Yeah.
Because that decision has already been made.
Oh,
And
yeah. So you think it's more of like a defense mechanism, maybe?
I don't know, but I wonder.
Yeah.
I think the second feeling I have there is, wow, she was robbed and she participated.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Because in the moment that she's getting that news, that baby's still there.
Mm-hmm. You can even see her holding her stomach.
Yeah, and I'm watching it and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and that's no longer the case.
As the word says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, your person. And so I think to your point, maybe there is that detachment there, and our culture would come alongside him and say, yeah, that's right. See, it's just a clump of cells, it's just a medical procedure, it's healthcare.
Right.
It's not, you're not actually doing the thing you deep down in your heart know that you're doing.
I think one of the strange aspects of it, and I touched on this at one point too, is that the very community, the medical community that has spent so much time and effort perfecting their understanding of the human body, how to help the human body, how to get us through viruses, bacterial infections, birth defects, all kinds of things. We spend so much time doing that and learning what we can about babies in the womb. We've learned so much, and yet we haven't allowed that to translate into how we treat these moments, how we treat parents who are getting this news, how we treat the children who have these differences. And it is a very strange, I think, dichotomy to have
Yeah.
so much advancement, so much knowledge. I can understand a long time ago without the knowledge having these strange ideas that human life doesn't matter until it's a certain point along, because you have no way to track that or understand that. You don't know when its heart is beating. You don't know anything's happening with its life until it's kicking, or we've seen different rules along history with when is a baby going to be considered a murder victim in a case when,
Right.
but all of that is tied to how much knowledge we had. And you would think that as our knowledge evolved, our care and concern would evolve, but it has gone the opposite direction in a lot of ways. I find that very odd, particularly within the medical community itself. And one thing that stood out to me, even in the post that he wrote, and I could see it almost kind of sowing the seeds for how he would then say it later in that video, but to say, oh, putting her at risk.
Yeah.
There was nothing that they've released anyway.
Yeah.
That suggests her body was in any way at risk from what was going on with their son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not talking about some excess fluid buildup because the baby's not engaging. I mean, that was one of the top fears I had with the not swallowing in the ultrasound, was that, okay, if she never swallows and we continue creating amniotic fluid, we'll get to a point where I will be forced to deliver and I'll know that she's not strong enough. And that will be a horrible experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have known moms who have had to face that, who have held on as long as they could.
And I like that you used the word deliver, because at that point you deliver and you try to save.
Yes.
It's not a life-ending procedure.
Right. And there's no reason in those circumstances when the mom's body is at risk, there's no reason to first kill or dismember the baby. There's no reason to do that.
Well, and she was so far along. She was almost halfway through the pregnancy. Like I don't
through the thing, as he said.
Yeah,
Which that was another. That
more
was
detachment.
that felt like a knife in my in my heart when he said she's halfway through this thing, and I'm like, oh, that's like, sorry, that's like red flag number one. He is so detaching from this, and I'm not going to say it's a malicious reason. I don't know that. I don't know him. It again could be very self-preserving in nature.
Yeah,
but as soon as he said halfway through this thing, and I'm going, oh gosh, this is just more than a thing. This is I'm halfway through building a life over here.
Yeah. Wow. Well, okay, so we have a very singular goal on this episode. We've talked about this before we went on the air. We want to save lives. We really want to save lives. So I want you each to have like a final word. I know there's probably, as people listen to this episode, they might send it to somebody who's just received this diagnosis. Mandi, I want you to talk about the resource that you have available for women in this situation. But Carli, I'll start with you. Any final words, maybe to the woman who is listening to this, who has just received the news, or maybe there's questions about the ultrasound. What would you say to her?
Yeah. You're not alone. It feels dark. It does feel dark in that moment when everything that you expected shatters. The bottom comes out from underneath you, but you are not alone. And with a Down syndrome diagnosis, and with any diagnosis, there's so much hope. I would highly, highly encourage you to reach out to your local Down syndrome association. There are tons of Facebook groups. That was a lifeline to me. I remember at the time I was a content writer, and I was sitting in Starbucks one day writing and just happened to, it's like, I wonder if there's Facebook groups for this. And so I hopped on, and I just in the middle of Starbucks was just weeping with joy and hope.
Yeah.
For the first time, in those early days, one of the first times I just felt like, you know what, like these people love, like capital L love their kids with Down syndrome and their family members and their friends with Down syndrome. And they're not just saying it. That's the thing, is it's not just a pro-life agenda to get people to save their babies, which obviously that's deeply important, but like there is actually so much fun to be had in this community. I chuckle a little bit just thinking like this is like a secret club that nobody thinks they want to be part of, but then once you're in, you're like, oh, like I get it. This is the good stuff. This is the zest of life. Like it really is. There's so many things about people with Down syndrome that the world needs more of. I've said that before and I'll say it over and over again. So I highly encourage you to reach out to your local Down Syndrome Association. I encourage you to reach out to someone you personally know, if anyone, who has a family member or a child with Down syndrome, just for support. Because I mean, once you've walked this road, you are overjoyed to jump in and help people that are in your same shoes because you've been there. And so just don't isolate yourself. Don't only talk to the medical providers who have not walked this road for themselves. Walk to someone who gets it, or talk to someone who gets it.
And maybe walk to them.
Yeah.
You know,
And maybe
run.
walk to them too.
Yeah,
yes.
run to them.
Yes,
That's
run to them. But yeah, this is a life that is precious, and there's just a lot of hope. And yeah, I'm here. I don't know if you'll link me somehow in the social media, but I mean, I'm always a shoulder to cry on, so to speak, and just a person who can shed light on what it really is like to have a child with Down syndrome. And there's a lot of good stuff there. So
Love it.
Yeah, I would say to any mom out there who, and dad for that matter, who's sitting there holding a diagnosis like this, or maybe it's one that has more ambiguity to it, like what we have experienced with Edwards syndrome, that you're, like Carli said, the doctors that are telling you things, they only know what's in books. They know what's published in pamphlets and journals about statistical medical findings. But no one can give you a percentage or an expiration date for your child. Every individual person is going to manifest in different ways, and you have no idea yet. So I would just want to encourage you to open your hands and open your heart and open your mind to possibility that no one else is going to speak to you, life that no one else is going to speak to you. And like to Carli's point, find someone who has walked this road and is doing it with courage, because you're going to need it. You're going to need that courage. You're going to be glad that you leaned on it and that you asked for it. And it's not something that I think anyone is necessarily born with. No one's a superhero. You know, people, I hear this sometimes, people with special needs are given, special parents with special abilities.
Nope.
No. I am not a superhero. I'm a person who loves her daughter, and I'm speaking the language of these medical things because she needs me to. And I'm learning it because she needs me to.
That's so good.
And I love her. And you can love your child and learn whatever they're asking of you as your story unfolds.
Yes, there's grace for every step of the journey.
And I would just really encourage you not to try to close the book before the ending makes itself known. So because I wish that I had someone saying those things to me when it was my turn to be in your situation now, first finding things out. I have put together resources for families who are in this situation. I have a podcast where I talk openly, very candidly about how we've processed from the earliest moment that we learned about our diagnosis all the way up through consequent decisions we made, even to continue growing our family, or all the things that we've experienced with Ellie, travel that we've done, just the life that we've led with her these 5 years, to try to help moms understand what there even is out there that they don't know yet. Because I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what to ask. I didn't know what to push for. I didn't know what was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's an element of not knowing what's okay. What is kindness?
Mm-hmm.
What is grace and mercy for yourself, for your child, for your family? There's a lot of fear and talk of what could happen that's bad. But to Carli's point, there's so much that can be good,
Mm-hmm.
even in the hardest of things.
Yes.
The moments where you're going, God, how could you let these things happen that are so hard? Aren't there plenty of other things that are hard that are not this hard that I could live and life could still be interesting? You know, and if you are in that place right now where you're saying, like I did, I remember the prayer of Jesus in the garden. God, take this cup from me, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we can explore other options, let's talk about that. But he said, not my will, yours be done. And I'll admit, through my pregnancy, I was not there yet. I was not at the second half of that phrase. I was at that first part. Lord, can we talk about what other options you might come up with here? But I definitely would say to moms out there that you will be serving yourself, your family, your children, your child so much better by allowing that story to be written, to be played out,
Mm-hmm.
to live through those things that you think you can't live through. And let it be. Um,
That's so good.
and just live the story and don't close it off or shut it down before it has a chance to be written.
That's
Because
so
it's
good.
your story too.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, give the website and the name of your podcast.
So my podcast is called A Little Extra Momming, because that's what we do.
It's so good, guys. It's
Parenting
so
Plus.
good.
So A Little Extra Momming is what that's called. And I have a website called the extracarecollective.com. And it'll take you to my Substack where I put out articles. I have a guide, a system of guides that can walk you through everything from processing your diagnosis through how you can talk to your doctors when you're in the NICU, if you're finding out after birth, how you can advocate for your child and feel confident about those things, even though you're brand new to this world. And then how you can set yourself up for some smoother transitions in coming home, if you do come home with a child with these kind of medical complexities, to answer some of those questions and fill those gaps that the medical community doesn't necessarily have the training or the time to give you.
Or the
You can find
biblical
those there.
worldview to give you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So good.
I have one more thing to add. Please, if you're receiving a trisomy 21 diagnosis, go meet someone with Down syndrome. Like, go, not just the parents of the people with Down syndrome, but go meet adults with Down syndrome and just glean that way, rather than looking at the statistics, and also or any genetic abnormality. Go find and actually talk to and touch and build relationship with these people, because I think you'll gain a far different perspective by doing real life rather than just looking at numbers. And with Down syndrome too, like, Shep has already far exceeded our expectations. I remember even in the beginning, someone said, well, people with Down syndrome can't jump. Shep is 3 years old and he can jump on the trampoline.
Well, he can jump.
Like, watch. I mean, every child is so different. And God is above statistics and above diagnoses and limitations. There's triathlon runners out there who have Down syndrome, and actors. Like, the world is becoming, ironically, not inclusive before they're out of the womb, but out of the womb, we're in a beautifully inclusive world now. And there's so many adaptations that have been made to accommodate these kids, and life can be really, really beautiful. So
love that.
Yes.
So good. Well, I want to thank my guests, Mandi and Carli. Check out those resources. And let's remember, as we pursue Christ, to keep a sharp mind, a soft heart, and a thick skin.
Who's that?
Mommy.
Is mommy? Who else? Who else? Who's the boy?
Shepherd.
Shepherd. The shepherd.
Who's this?
Ellie. Got like closed eyes. Oh. YMCA. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. Dance parties all the time in my mind. It's like